to get us going, I wanted just to kind of give some thoughts about my general way of framing, thinking about bringing youth out in the cold, and my general framework is that when you are cold, your kids are hypothermic. The little people, they've got, you know, if I've got this much insulation around my arm to the point that like the cold that's out here kind of penetrates that, if you've got a smaller arm, it's by the time, you know, you get, you know, cold penetrating this far into your body, you're chilled all the way through your little frame. And so generally speaking, I like to think that if I'm cold, they're hypothermic. If I'm thirsty, the kids I'm with are dehydrated. If I'm hot, they're probably getting kind of the first stages of heat stroke. And if I'm a little bit hungry, they're probably hypoglycemic. And so I like to just sort of use myself as a general barometer. And unless I'm really tricked out with gear. So if I've got like all my stuff on, I'm insulated from the vagaries of the day. And I want to look around and notice if my kids aren't. And so if I have a kind of an order of magnitude different kind of gear than they're wearing, then the cues that I get for like, oh, it's really cold. I'm not going to be able to have those same direct cues in working with my students. But if you've got sort of a kind of equivalent equipment, the general idea, you know, you're cold, they're hypothermic, is a good rule of thumb. It's a little bit conservative, and that's the way I like to keep it. Another thing that I think about as I'm doing sort of nature journaling in extreme conditions with students is I like to think that if really kind of respect their creature comforts. If you get really cold, your ability to think goes way down. I think of like when you're cold, you just want to stand there and kind of go like this, right? And the idea of like, you know, hey, let's get out our journals and really kind of engage with this. You don't have the bandwidth. So sort of think about your Maslow pyramid. We're asking students to do some pretty high order stuff on that pyramid. So if we're, you know, really kind of, you know, thinking in nature connection and self-actualization, all this sort of crazy stuff. If they're basically, if they're really uncomfortable, you know, cold, wet, miserable, it's not going to be a happy journaling experience. So one of the biggest dangers I've found is wet. So if it's cold, it's cold. If it's cold and wet, it's cold, and that will catch up with you really, really fast. It's also in the wet, it's very difficult to manage your gear. Right? You've got little wet hands, you start turning the pages, your hands are really kind of turning numb and they're getting your page all wet. And think about sort of in the rainstorm, now it's dripping on your journal. Let's say this is a journal that can kind of handle, you know, rugged field conditions. It's still going to be really tough. Because this journal that you really like is now getting all wet and bent out of shape. So the kid doesn't like that. If it's a cheaper journal, it gets wet and it starts falling apart. It's hard to write on wet paper. And you can get, you know, the write in the rain journals, but those are more expensive. And for most of the time, you probably don't need those. I've tried getting, big garbage bags and kind of making a little tent out of it. And so I'm in there with my journal. I've used clear plastic bags for kind of getting my journal and my hands up underneath, and I can see through the plastic bag, but still my hands are coming in there wet, and it's turning the whole experience, it's kind of rough. So I find that a lot of students are gonna, if they have a really negative experience like that, they're gonna associate that negative experience with the process of nature journaling. And so it might be, if it's a cold, rainy day, to set the journals aside and go out and have a puddle adventure and go exploring and look at a few things. And you can do the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of without a journal, right? And so you can be looking at something, and the trick again with this, if you haven't used the system, you're saying out loud all the things that you're observing and engaging other people in discourse about it. And so it's a really dynamic, interactive, brain engaging system. You can do that without a journal. And then what you can do is, you at some point, if you want to get some of that into your journal, you can say, all right, let's look at this, and we're going and describe it out loud. And when we get back, we're going to do, our challenge is to do memory drawings of whatever it is. So let them know when they're in the field that they're going to be doing some memory drawings of this phenomenon. And then you, and the great thing to do is to kind of look at it, talk about it, say out loud all the things that you want to remember. Again, if you say out loud the things that you want to remember, the specificity of your memory goes way, 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 way up, crazy up. So you can do that. And then when you get back, one last thing you can do before you leave is you can have everybody in your group kind of look at whatever phenomenon or object. And the question that I find is fun to ask for a memory thing is, what is an observation that is a really subtle one that you can make right now, that if you didn't say it out loud, by the time you get home, you probably will have forgotten it. And so then people are looking for the thing that they're, and it just sort of prompts people to kind of look around the object another way. So then they say those things out loud, and you're then also hearing all the cool things from other people. Another way of framing that, is there anything that you can notice about this that you think you may be the only person here who notices? Right? That brings a little bit more competition into it. I kind of like the other one a little bit better, where you're kind of thinking like, what might I forget? And then you can go home and do those. But if it's really a really wet day, bringing out the journal is difficult. Sitting down on the ground, on wet ground, is difficult. If you're sitting down on frozen ground, on snow, then you can have a little piece of an insulate pad. Everybody brings a little sit-upon, and you add that in as part of your nature journaling gear. But on a really wet day, things are just, it's getting soggy. So I spent some time I haven't had that much success with journaling in rain with students. I've gone out on my own a few times and done it, where it was kind of this little project, like, I'm journaling in the rain, ooh, check that out. And just sort of for the novelty of it, it was really fun for me because I was already really into nature journaling, and I was kind of geeking out on the sheer novelty of nature journaling in the rain. There's a wonderful video that Marley made one day where he's out underneath an umbrella, and you can see all the rain coming down, and he's kind of tucked under his umbrella, and he's journaling in the rain. So if you're really geeking out on it and you're into it like that, that's fun to do. But for a class, for a group, my general experience is that people are kind of put off by that. So those are a few of my initial thoughts and ideas about some sort of experiences with kind of going out into the rain. And what I want to do is to turn it over to our rogues gallery here, and we're going to bat the idea around and explore and share ideas. everybody is able to unmute themselves. The general strategy on this is when you're not directly talking, just reach over and mute. And that way you won't disturb everybody else while you are while you're not talking. So that's a good thing to do. But we really want to hear from you. What experiences have you had? What strategies are you finding works? Are there any activities that you find very successful? And let's take a look at some, if you have any journal page examples of inclement weather journal pages, what those look like. If you have any of those around you, we'd love to see any of those things. Like, what did you do on the wet day? That could be when you're inside looking out. That could be when you got back. Maybe it was done in the field. What did you do on the cold day? Since we're also just talking about environmental things, if you want to throw in ideas and experiences that you had in hot weather journaling, how you handled that. But again, just always have in the back of your head, your kids' safety is your #1 priority. Second priority, if they see that you're really kind of responsive to their comfort, they're going to trust you. You're showing that you're worthy of their trust. You're like, I got you guys. I got you guys. If they're thinking I hope Jack doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. Right? That's not a good thing. So you can help build trust by taking care of their basic needs and their creature comforts out there, and then you can start to build higher order thinking and nature experiences on top of that. Who's up?
I'll share. What comes to mind is, thanks, Jack, for all of that. That's a really great introduction to journaling outside in any kind of unpleasant weather. Another thing I'll add is when I've taken kids out, I've worked with kids that are ready to go outside. So they're kind of already prepared with rain boots and rain pants and rain gear for rainy days, because I've taught at nature schools where we're outside all day. And so if you're prepared, what can happen is just going out and exploring nature and like leaving the journals in your backpacks or, undercover, and just going in, like Jack was saying, doing the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, but also I think we've talked about this before, letting the students kind of lead the interest and following their curiosity. So there was one time I took the students outside I can't remember what we were going to look at, but I always have this backup, right? So you have this plan, but then sometimes the kids will divert. And this particular day was this gigantic mud puddle, and it was irresistible. And at this school, the kids had like rain pants and rain boots and rain jackets. And so they would say, Miss Melinda, and point at the puddle. I'm like, can we jump in it? And it was just like the joy in their faces. And I knew that that's what they needed in that moment, because if I tried to divert their attention from this irresistible mud puddle, and it's okay with the class teacher, right? So I was taking these kids out of the classroom. So I said, go for it. And so, just watching them just really, get that out of their system and just really enjoy the puddle. And then we can get back to, now they were wet, so we're going to go inside. We collected a few things, and then we can go inside and we can talk about what we've seen and what we experienced, and include that puddle, that experience of the rain and the water, whatever information that ties with it. So I think it's about reading your students and allowing the environment to be dynamic, for it to be dynamic. Because there's nothing like forcing your kids to look at one thing when they're completely interested in something else. Some of the activities that were really successful on days where we couldn't nature journal outside for whatever reason was collecting things. We did one of the activities from How to Teach Nature Journaling. It was, I think it's called To Each His Own, where everyone collects the same object, whether it's a pine cone or a stick. or, you know, some kind of maybe a leaf, and then they all come back and they do the notice wonder, it reminds me of, on their object, and they draw a picture of it, and then we put all the journals in a circle on the floor in the classroom, and all of the sticks or the leaf or whatever object it was, and then we try to match which leaf goes to what. And that's a really fun activity to do when you can't be outside. So I think a lot of these nature journaling activities can be started outside and then finished inside. I like I do the memory journal as well, you know, talking it out. So that's, you know, that's also great. But yeah, I agree. You know, forcing them to do nature journaling when they're not into it is going to give them a negative connection with that experience. So just kind of following where that interest and curiosity is really key.
Yeah, that's a good thought. It reminds me of a day I was working up at the Walker Creek Outdoor School. It was a rainy day, and there was a kind of, I had a chance to sort of see two trail groups this week. I was working as sort of a floating naturalist, kind of going and helping different support groups. I got to watch different groups kind of go out. One naturalist kind of went out, and it was just pouring, and they kind of went around in their rain ponchos, and they would stand there like this in the rain, and you know, that just dripping and being kind of cold kids. There's another naturalist who, just like, you know, Melinda's describing here with the puddle jumping, where they found this place where there was this almost kind of a mudslide. That there was this area, there was a little bit of a slope, and there was mud on it, and somebody slipped and they fell and they got muddy. And the naturalist kind of went with this, and the next thing she knew, she had like the kids were running and diving into this thing like a slip and slide, and were sliding in the mud, and they were covered head to toe in mud. They were wet, they were dirty, they had a ball, and then they went back inside and they got cleaned off. And later on, in the teachers' meetings, when the kids would go report to their kids, the kids reported, like, you know, how was your day? It was awful. It was raining. It was cold. It was this nasty old day. And the other kids were, you know, we got cold, we got wet. It was really dirty out there. And the other kids were like, we got cold, we got wet, we got dirty. It was like amazing, best day ever. You know, and, yeah. So sometimes, if you kind of know you have a way of getting your kids warmed up again, going ridiculously all in and breaking the kind of the rules and the boundaries of what we normally do can be really fun.
I want to throw in a couple things that I just remembered is rain painting. So you could go outside and have the rain, put maybe not your whole journal, but, you know, have a piece of paper that you put outside in the rain, and let the rain splotch the watercolor or paint on your paper. So you can paint it first and then put it outside and have the water dance on it. I think you could probably do that with snow.
Great.
I've had some experiences with kindergartners at my garden, or not my garden, community garden. So I guess it also depends on how much it's raining as well. If it's a really, really big downpour, we wouldn't want them to come out, because, I mean, did I say kindergartners? I meant preschoolers, because they're preschoolers and they're like 3 to 4 years old. They're quite young. But if it's not raining horribly much, then there's this lovely trellis in the garden that sort of covers over this one area, a bit like, I don't know, maybe the size of a couple of tables put together. And so I have these blankets that they're somewhat resistant to the wet, like not perfectly resistant, but they don't just, if you put water on them, they'll sort of bead a little bit. Found them in my godmother's closet a while ago. So what I would do is I'd put these on the ground for them underneath that trellis. And and I would have them draw something cool that they'd seen in the garden that day. Maybe we'd been quickly going through and looking at the way that the water lands on the leaves of the plants, or maybe we would be seeing what bugs are out. Or if, I think that maybe one time we had been doing a worm lab where we put the worm inside of a tray, like the worms and their castings inside of a tray from the compost. And then usually I would use a spray bottle to say, how do the worms move when it's dry versus wet? But if it's raining, then it's kind of like, oh, hey, look, now that it's raining, we can see how they like to move in the rain. And then we can kind of look around and make observations. And so when they're sitting on their things, they like this too. They say it's nice and soft. So a lot of them like sitting on the ground on this. And I'd usually layer them. And then I might read a book to them. So I might read The Big Storm, which is a counting story, and have the kids count along with me. And by the end of it, it winds up being really, really peaceful and kind of, they feel very cozy at the end of it, even though it's raining. But we always make allowances too to stop it early if we need to. And it helps that it's inside of, a garden with a trellis. And other times there's a sort of a picnic bench that we can put these on if it's not that wet. So I guess it's different if you're kind of out in the woods.
Yeah, the flexibility that you're describing, Ivea, is really important. So you're able to, you're paying attention to them, their comfort zone, and you're willing to kind of let go of your agenda of what you're planning to do if it was just a lovely day. And by the way, lovely days can also be raining. So I'm not saying that rainy days are not lovely. I'm saying it's not when it's, you change it from the schedule that you'd have was a warmer day. So you're adapt what you do for the conditions that you're experiencing. Let's think about snow and cold.
I have an idea about snow. So when the ground is covered with snow, the animal footprints are very visible. And so you can have participants try to sketch the footprints and the patterns that they make in the snow and make guesses about what sort of animal made those footprints. And then when you go inside, have resources available that they can look and see if their guesses were right.
That's a great idea. And I just wrote a little note to myself. I'll set up a class, a Thursday workshop, try to fit it in this month. I'll do one on animal tracking in the snow. And, or that could also be, animal tracking in mud, some places where you're seeing track patterns. So not just looking at an individual track, but how to see that, observe it, document it down in your journal. What are some strategies that you can use?
If the conditions are just right, you can also take, it has to be, the footprints have to be clear enough, and it has to be cold enough that you can take a spray bottle and spray the footprint with a little bit of water, and then use a plaster of Paris to make a model of the footprint, and then they can bring it inside and study it more closely.
Yeah, one challenge with plaster of Paris is that I think it's an exothermic reaction, that plaster of Paris, when it sets, actually creates heat.
Right.
One way around that is alginate. Have you ever been to the dentist and had the dentist take they put this sort of pepperminty, sweet tasting kind of goo into your mouth to make an impression of your teeth? That's a product called alginate. It's made from seaweed. You can buy big canisters of it, and you stir it up, and you add water to it. You pour it into the track. It sets very, very quickly within a few minutes, and it doesn't produce heat. You can then take that, and you get this sort of jelly. It's sort of kind of like a stiff gummy bear, and you can take that then out and bring it back to a place where you're in shelter, put a cardboard ring around it, turn it upside down so that the track is sticking up like this, and you pour the plaster on top of it. And you can make casts of it So if you get one of these little alginate things, you can actually make multiple casts with the plaster. So that's one way of kind of getting around not having the plaster melt the track. I haven't had success with plaster of Paris directly in snow, but does that work for you, Sharon?
I've tried it several times, and sometimes it has to be just right in terms of the temperature, and yeah, it has to be very, very cold. Okay. And yeah, so.
Interesting. But one way around that is the alginate, because then you don't have the chemical reaction, the heat produced by the drying plaster. That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that, Sharon. And it certainly works great in tracks in the mud, right? And you get sometimes when there's snow, there's often mud, right? Other thoughts and ideas about cold weather conditions. Let's think specifically snow. Just a few things that come to my mind. One is insulation and waterproofing, so that if you want to stay warm and you want to stay dry. And so for the insulation part, even if you've got rain pants on, if you're sitting on snow, the cold from the snow is going to come right up into your tushy, and you're going to get really chilled kids really fast. One way to handle that is, if you have an outdoor program, is to take an Insulite pad and make little sit-upons. And then you can take that and fold it, and each kid puts one in their backpack. You give them out at the start of the hike. You come to a place, everybody gets out their sit-upon, or you can keep all the sit-upons in your teacher backpack. You get out the sit-upons, people can sit upon the sit-upons. And that makes a big difference. But if you're just sitting directly on top of ice or snow, the conductive cold will chill your bottom pretty fast. Other things that I find I've used, the very thin gloves that are used for joggers. Those very, very thin gloves give you just a little bit of fingers out time. And if you use those in combination with either the fingerless gloves, so you have your thin gloves on top of the fingerless gloves, that's keeping your palm warm, and then your fingers are still dangling out there. Or you also have those guns that are sometimes, those gloves, the mittens that are used for hunters. The advantage of mittens is that when your fingers are together, your fingers will be warmer. If they're each out in their own tube, they're going to get colder faster. And so if you have those mittens that you can take, unhook and flip the part back so your fingers are sticking out, and now you have your skinny glove fingers sticking out there. A lot of them also have one on the thumb that you can fold back, so you can stick your fingers and thumb out of your mittens and then be able to draw. That helps a lot. But again, that goes along with gear. Generally, kids who live in cold places have the gear. Right?
I had another thought about an activity. So, you know, there's all different kinds of snow. There's the heavy wet snow, there's the light fluffy snow. So, and the water content in all of those different types of snow is different. So you can put out a metal can to collect snowfall, and then melt the snow, and you measure the depth of the snow that has fallen in the metal can, and then you allow the snow to melt, and you measure the depth of the water, and depending upon the kind of snow that you had fall, there'll be very large differences. So that's an interesting thing to introduce to kids.
Oh, that's a really cool thought. I like that. Hey, Brian, do you want to share the things which we type into the chat are not going to be seen by everybody? You had an interesting thought. Do you want to share your thought and idea?
Sure, I'll just put this on the record. I was just curious if we can tie, the nature drilling aspects that we would normally do with the traditional science curriculum. So if you're discussing the water cycle, then can we then sort of go outside and observe where it's raining? Is the water being stuck on some leaves? What happens with, deciduous trees versus evergreen trees? Are we getting muddy puddles? Just paying attention to that. And it's okay if you jump in the muddy puddle as well, of course. And then can we transfer that into kind of where does the water run off to? Are we in an urban environment where it's running off into a grate somewhere? Is it all collecting and, now we have this giant puddle at the edge of the street? All those types of observations can help us connect to, to a general science curriculum. And it's something you can do without your sketchbook, right? And then, you can also just observe when it's raining. So is it raining earlier in the year than we might expect? We're in a Mediterranean climate, so we typically aren't going to get, sort of the question of, when are we going to get our first rain here in California? It hasn't rained for us yet. And then when's the rainy season going to end? When does the snow melt come? When does, the first snow come? All those sorts of things where we can start to create maybe our own time series and things like that.
So really keeping track of that weather. And then you're also saying when the event happens, get out in it, study the water cycle when the water is cycling. That's good. If you are out there and you kind of look down into the storm drain and there's a clown saying, come on down here with me, by the way, that's not a good group activity. Don't go there. I wanted to, cold weather is filled with cool phenomena, right? So the big part of science teaching these days is getting people to look at phenomena. And what's meant by phenomena, it's basically anything that you see that's going on that you can study and you can learn about by direct observation or inference. So what are phenomena? Everything going on outside the window, in here, like, and what you have to do is just sort of train yourself to realize, like, oh, I'm looking at something right here that is interesting, and what can I do with this? So if you're, I'm going to just start with a couple examples with rainfall. It rains. Where does the rain come in? Sort of the stuff that Brian's talking about. Then look at dirty drying puddles, ones perhaps with pollen in them. Those puddles, as they dry, they leave these little rings, and they're leaving this pattern behind. You can study the pattern and learn something about what was going on here. At what points was there more pollen in these puddles? Huh, that's interesting. The things that are eroding are really, really cool. If you get a major rain event, you're going to get surges in creeks. And those are the events that carve the landforms, right? Those landforms, you can't really understand them unless you kind of go out in these extreme events. If you're looking at some desert wash arroyo, right? Well, how did this get that way? If you're not there during the flood event, during the big water event, the landform you're looking at doesn't make any sense. But the minute you're out there at one of those big events, you're kind of like, oh, I think I understand the erosional forces that are at play here, right? What I want to do is, now I'm going to take you over, we've got my dot cam here. I'm going to bring you over to a journal and show you some nature journaling activities that I did with students in Plumas County during the middle of winter. And when I went up there, I had done a series of teacher trainings on how to do nature journaling, I guess about a year before this visit. And this was a return trip in the dead of winter. And they said, we're just, having we can't really do as much nature journaling right now because the, there's no plants in bloom. There's not really anything going on right now. Okay, so I went up to teach these nature journaling workshops at the time where nothing was going on. So let's check out what was going on. And what I would do is I would roll into the school, get all the kids geared up in their stuff. We'd grab our journals, and then we'd walk outside. And but my challenge for myself was, with each class that I was going out with, I was going to just find a totally different phenomenon. And then I would get, at the end of the day, get the teachers starting to talk with each other. And we had this staff meeting at the end. And I said, all right, so we went out and we looked at phenomena with your class. What did we look at? What about your class? What did we look at? And each class had looked at totally crazy different stuff. And it was all cool. And they realized that, oh, our school right now is filled with phenomena. Phenomenal phenomena. And so it is partly just sort of a way of looking at it. But extreme cold conditions, oh, the world will start doing things that are weird, and we can document that in our journals. Let's go there now. So here is my, come on, camera, show up. I'm not showing up. Are you on? Yes, you're on over here. One more time. And cue the camera. There it is. All right, so check this out. That's some fun stuff. Oh, look at this. So this was actually me teaching a group of adults. It was supposed to be a class on drawing in snow, but I was up in Sorensen's in Hope Valley. There was no snow, but it was very cold. All right. So this is January. And so what we did is this is drawings of frost, things that frost does. So going out just early morning, and here are these long frost crystals all over things. And I was looking at where the frost was, what types of plants got frost on them, how frost looked differently on grass stems versus lodgepole pine branches, right? So this is just a diagram, like, what are things that frost does? So teach me about frost, right? Look at this, frost was only growing on the top of this branch, but on this grass stem, it's top and bottom. Isn't that strange? Very strange. And on this one, on grass blades that were vertical, the frost was short, and grass blades that were horizontal, the frost was long. What's up with that? So I had no idea that frost would do this, but you go out there and you start looking at frost, frost is going to be doing its own frost thing. This was looking at, there was a stream flowing with a little ice wedge floating or attached on the downstream side of of a rock in the stream. So here's the top view, here's the side view. And this was my guess about how this could have formed, right? This was coming back into a warmer place. This is looking at dew in the morning. So this was a morning, there's dew all over everything. It's hard to sit down in the grass because everybody's going to get wet. But what I did is I just made the dew and the formation of the dewdrops the phenomenon that we were recording. And it does all these kind of cool and interesting things. I mean, look at that. Look at those dewdrops sticking to the edges of a grass blade. So that's across this little cross section right there. Boom, boom. Who knew? All right. But wait, there's more. We're going to go. Oh, here I was. So this is on a manhole cover, a metal manhole cover. There's some water that formed on it. And there were these diagonal spikes of sticking out from that cover. And a bunch of them had
little bubbles inside of them, and they would often contain a small little piece of grass. This is a phenomenon that I have no idea how it formed. But this was during a Charlotte Mason conference on the East Coast, and went out there, taught, was super cold. We went outside, we found crazy stuff. We found these little ice spikes growing up from the ground. Who knew? There's nothing above them, by the way, that would have been dripping on them, in case you were wondering. Now, let's go up there to, now let's go up into the ice and snow. This is just sort of sitting around making some notes while sitting inside a car, looking out at a pipit, walking around on the ice and thinking about the cold. And then thinking about that cold air and cold water, which is going to be colder. And here with my arrows, what I'm doing is I am diagramming my thoughts about heat loss, right, from the ducks and how that's going to be different when they're standing on the ice versus floating around in the water. Now check this out. This was done with a bunch of students. The roofs of the school were these metal corrugated things, and so there are slats between them. And as the sun came out and started to melt, the snow in each one of those slats, in each of those runways, started to slip down and made these curls on the end, so dangling and curling off the end. So as they would slide down, they started to curl. So this is one of the phenomena that the kids and I investigated. So with one group of kids, we did this, right? Then I brought the next group of kids out, and what we did is we walked around and we looked at north, south, and east facing slopes of the school buildings. And we found that on the south facing slopes of the school buildings, there was hardly any snow. And on the north facing slopes of the buildings, there was a ton of snow, although it was starting to slide off, leaving a bare strip at the top. And then the east and the west facing slopes, that's where you found these snow curls that the other students had found before. That's what was going on here. Isn't that cool? I mean, and then we go out with the next class and we start looking at icicles, and we found a horizontal icicle. A horizontal icicle. How did that form? So we document it and describe it in our journals. This is a cross section of those icicles. So this is through point B here. It's actually at an angle. Through point A here, it's wider at the top. Here's point C. It comes down and it claws like that. Has a little twist in it. And then here is a diagram of how that icicle was attached. And seeing that, one of the students, actually a bunch of the students, everybody's trying to figure out how did this happen. And we all diagrammed our best guesses of how that could have happened. And here's mine. In the beginning, an icicle behaving correctly. But then you slip down off the roof, and so your icicles are now pointing to the side. And then water runs along the bottom edge of that and drips down at the end, making the next stage. Don't know, but that's my best guess. So the kids are trying to figure, I mean, ice is such a cool phenomenon. Another group of students went out and we were looking at water dripping off the icicles from the roof, right? You could actually see the path of the water inside of it. So why is this water coming across here, going like that, and then dripping here, instead of this water coming down here and making this the primary icicle? What's going on with there, right? And a lot of them had these little dips at the top where this was a pattern that we saw on a bunch of the icicles, that little scoop at the top, where it's up against the flashing of the building. Why was it narrow there? So you see, these phenomena. These are cold weather phenomena that were just all around the school. And what you have to do is just look around and see how those phenomena, you start to investigate those, and you'll find all sorts of different cool things. This was wondering about swans and when they hunker down, whether they hunker down on the ice, on the water, or and when they feed. And so here is a little graph that I made of when it's stormy and snowy and windy, and when it's sunny, whether they're resting on the ice, resting on the water, or feeding on the water. And I have too small of a sample size to say anything definitive because it was snowing for most of the time. But next time I'm out and I see swans in the sun, I'm going to want to fill in some more tick marks here. I wonder, how does their behavior change depending on what the weather is doing? That was a student-driven question. What do they do when it rains? This is looking at otter track patterns in the snow. This actually wasn't with the students. I was driving up to another school, and a river otter ran across the road in front of me, down along the river, and then jumped into the creek. And I got out and diagrammed its track patterns, and there was actually blood in one of its feet. So one of its feet had blood on that, and we're wondering what was going on with that. But this is, yeah, exactly as folks were saying earlier. That's a fun thing to do in the snow. Another group of students. This is snow piled on top of sticks. Here's a cross section across this, looks like this. Here's a cross section across this stick with the snow piled up on it, looks like that. Isn't that neat? Now the ice is dangling on the bottom. The snow is piling on the top. Isn't that interesting? And look at these little arches through here. What's going on here? So this stimulated lots of interesting questions from the students. And you see that you can also just get experience like how do you record a phenomenon like that? One final set of those for you. These the kids named the reverse sickles. These are reverse sickles. So they're growing on the ground at the edges of the buildings. There were these reverse sickles around grass blades. So it's a big blob of ice. And you look inside, there's a single grass blade, or here a pine needle. Some of them are fused together. One of the kids figured out that these were in the drip line of the building. And we came up with our guesses about how this formed. So cold weather means awesome phenomena. And because you start looking around and you're going to see a ton of stuff happening that you did not expect. So when things turn chilly, that's actually just cranking up the heat on the sorts of cool things that you can get going in your journal. Does anybody else have any other journal pages, perhaps from cold experiences, snow experiences, wet experiences, or if you're calling in from the desert, stuff that you did in a heat wave?
I don't have the greatest, but I have a messy page from a lightning storm.
Yeah, walk us through this. This is really cool, folks. Check out check out these observations from the lightning storm. Good, we're spotlighting. So walk us through this.
Okay, so I woke up pretty early in the morning, off and on. I think that my first observation was at like 4:50 a.m. And the lightning storm had, I can't remember if it was starting or not. Oh, that's right. I wrote down when I could hear the thunder versus sometimes when I could not see it, or over here, the times that I could see the flashes of light versus the times that I was hearing them, because I couldn't always do them both because they weren't always at the same time. So I began trying to track that. and also looking at the humidity, because I was curious to know if the humidity was informing whether the lightning storm was around and how strong it was being. And if the humidity changed, then would the lightning storm's behavior change as well? I was out, first I was sitting on my front porch, and then I kind of went out in it. And I'm here wearing this like strappy dress, completely covered in rain, and trying to write like a crazy woman. And people are kind of like walking by me and staring at me and kind of giving me a side eye. And I was just grinning like a maniac. And then I began trying to figure out which direction the storm was going. If you all have ever heard of Tristan Gooley, I'd highly recommend checking out his book, The Lost Art of Reading Nature Signs. He has this part in there about determining winds and also about seeing weather pattern changes. He calls the winds that we can feel the lower winds, and then the ones that move the clouds, the higher winds. So you stand with your back to the wind, whatever direction it's coming from, so that you feel the wind at your back, the lower winds, and then you look to see if the cloud's direction is changing. Is it going the same direction as the winds you can feel, or are they going from left to right or right to left? And if they're going from left to right, he says left to right, not quite right, meaning that there might be bad weather on the way because it's going to a low pressure system. So I was trying to figure that out. So I was noticing that the wind was blowing toward the west because I was facing west. My back was to the wind. That's where the wind was going. And yet the clouds were moving to the north. And so in that case, it would have been, left to right, not quite right. But that was obvious because it was the middle of a lightning storm. But I was curious to know if the lightning storm was hanging around or if it was moving. And I think I determined after a while that it slowly began to move more east, but I was trying to figure that out. And then I had questions, so I just scribbled them in and decided to make a lightning looking thing out of it. And I didn't have like a perfect pretty journal, but I had this, and you use what you have on hand. And in a way, maybe it made me less precious about it because I was writing it in my everyday journal. So fun times.
That's really cool. That's really cool. For whatever neighbors were kind of giving you, the evil eye, just know that you get, in this community, you get mad props for running around like a crazy person in the rainstorm. So if I may quote Avea, we love that. Let's jump over to Arpan and Ray Bonto. They've got something to share on this subject.
Okay, so it will
Show the page.
so this is not any natural phenomenon, but we were going to the farm and it was raining. So what you could do, rather.
Open the book. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, fine. What you could do, rather, is what was it? Yeah, okay, fine. You could take photographs, but I recommend you take videos rather than photographs. So we carried an umbrella, and I took a tiny little sketchbook, and I drew from there.
Show your page.
Yeah, you can come back to me later.
Okay, yeah, we'll pop back to you later. Just let us know when you've got that. We'd love to see what you did during that storm. That would be cool to see.
It's not a storm, it's just a rain.
Just in the rain. Okay, great. But I'd very much like to see that. Let's jump over to Melinda and check out this lightning moment.
So this is piggybacking on Ivea. I'm in California and we had the same lightning storm. Mine was earlier in the morning. It was like at 1:30 in the morning. And at first I just took it out at night and just scribbled what I could see and then just kind of started counting. So this is just an example that when you see a phenomenon, you may not know what you're going to record, but just be open to your curiosity and what shows up. What happened is I was noticing that there were so many lightning strikes. Like I've never seen that many in a short period of time. So I started counting how many strikes there were in certain time blocks, and they were 30-second time blocks. And the next day, because it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, I came and put them into little graphs just an experiment on like trying to visualize what was happening with the lightning storm. And part of me wishes we had more lightning storms so I could log it like this, but it was really fun to just go out and watch the lightning storm, to be in awe and wonder and curiosity, to just count things, measure things, be observant, and then later on kind of look at my data. And this is what a scientist does. They collect a lot of data. Sometimes they don't know what's going to happen with it, and then piecing things together. So this is just to show what it looked like, how many lightning strikes per 30-second intervals. And then I did over time from the first interval to the last interval to see if there was any change during that. I don't know if it was a 15-minute window that I watched. But I did notice that there was a change in range. So the area of the sky that was covered with lightning bolts was really small at first, the smallest blue square. And Jack had just talked about estimating like the range, like angle, like northeast, west, south. So I was kind of familiar with what direction it was from my yard. And at the time I used my iPhone as the compass. Now I know it's slightly off, but it was kind of giving me, at least these are all consistent from that evening. So I measured to the very far left and right of how far the lightning bolts went. And over time it changed. So by the time I stopped, it was covering the dark purple square. So this is from the east to the west and then altitude up into the sky. So I did potatoes. I held my hand out and did potatoes to estimate how far up in the sky was. So this is just to show that you can use the same kinds of tools and strategies for any phenomenon. And there is no book that shows you what's right and what's wrong. It's just the more that you use it as a teacher, the more that you'll be able to access that tool when the time is right. And then I'll just show a quick picture. So we had some really bad wildfires down where I'm in, and down in Carmel. And this was a tiny sketch of, through my spotting scope, I can see the hillsides and the fire blazing from in between the hillsides and the valley. And I was trying to show, I didn't know how tall they were, but I can see that the silhouettes of the trees along the hillside and how big the flames were. And so that was really cool. So I don't know how tall that is, but I can get a sense from the height of the mature trees that it was blazing. So yeah, those are my extreme weather phenomenon that I've journaled recently.
Oh, I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah.
That's really, really fun to see. Let's jump over to Avea.
I just wanted.
Who's going to add on that?
I just wanted to say that's another reason why I so strongly am happy that we're talking about journaling extreme weather, because journaling that lightning storm like we did, I think that it made it so that when the fires showed up, it made it even more vivid for us, because we were seeing the lightning storms that caused a lot of those fires. We were journaling them, and you can probably, I bet you can too, Melinda, you can go back to remembering the giddiness that you feel of journaling that and seeing the lightning and being like, oh, cool, lightning storm. And then the utter horror that comes afterwards, knowing that that beautiful lightning storm that you were admiring was causing all those fires. It gives a very personal connection to the experience. So I wanted to add on that and say yes to journaling extreme weather, because you never know what's going to happen next in the story. And also too, it reminds me of the really awesome lessons that both you, Jack, and you, Melinda, have done with numbers, both in this forum and also in Melinda's Sunday group. And I was thinking, Jack, would you mind doing that maybe some Thursday for the bigger group? Because I think that there's a lot of nature journalers in the bigger group who could really benefit from the numbers one and add that to their journals. Because I think that was one of the best lessons that just completely opened my eyes to a complete other third of what nature journaling is all about. So just wanted to add on.
Absolutely. I just wrote that down, and I'll get that on the calendar today. That's a really good point. And just to piggyback on what you're saying, Avea, another reason why it's so critical for us as scientists to be doing this, to be documenting these extreme weather events in our journals, is that you're the primary source in documenting change in weather conditions in your area. So scientists since the 70s have been predicting that if we increase the global temperature of the planet, that more extreme weather events are going to be happening, And so their frequency and the severity of these events is expected to go up. So that is extreme cold events, extreme hot events, lightning events when you don't expect them, increase in number of hurricanes, and sort of getting in there and documenting that, being the first person to sort of documenting this, I think is an important record that we can include in our journals. So this is what we're seeing happening is exactly the behavior that has been predicted, was predicted decades ago. That what we're seeing is what they're saying is it's important to do. So as scientists, documenting these things, I think is very, very valuable. Let's jump over to Ray Bonto, who has found the page that he was describing earlier. Yes.
Sorry about it, but anyways. So it started raining from when we saw the chickens, and kept on raining until we came to the swans and ducks. I don't know, we spent quite a long time there. And then from then on it was dry, mostly, but I did all this looking at the photographs, but probably you'd better take a video of stuff rather than taking photographs.
That's great. Yeah, what do the birds do when it rains? What do the chickens do? How is that different than what the ducks do when it rains? What does the Townsend's solitaire do in really cold weather? As we as we sort of see animals' responses in these conditions, those are also things that we can look at. So when you go out in extreme weather conditions and you see a critter, you can ask the question, what do these critters do under these conditions? What do the birds do when it rains? Right? How is that different across species? What do the birds do when it is a heat wave? Is the frequency of those birds showing up at your watering station in your yard more frequent? This was sketches of bird behavior during a heat wave, which we had here in California. And all these birds, little warblers and things, they were cruising around with holding their wings out away from their bodies. They had their feathers really compressed against their bodies, wings drooped and held out away from the bodies. I was guessing that was to try to get increased air circulation past them. They also all had their mouths open. All these birds walking around with their mouths open. And what that behavior is, it's called gular fluttering. And what they can't pant like a dog because they don't have a sort of wet tongue. But what they'll do is they'll open their mouth and pump air in and out of their body. You can sometimes see their throat vibrating like this as they do that. And what they're doing is they're sort of moving cooler air through their body just to try to shed heat. So all these different birds were gular fluttering. And I also found one dead bird next to a very sort of a drying puddle. And I was wondering if this bird had succumbed to the heat, another little warbler. And so, here is, you had what birds do in the rain. Here's birds responding to heat. And those are all things you can do. This is just kind of sticking with the fire theme. This is kind of, if we consider the smoke in the air, the sort of another sign of kind of weather conditions. This was looking at color of the sky at different times of the day. And 11 a.m., the street lights were coming on around my house because the sky was so dark. This was also kind of fun. This right here, that is a piece of packing tape that I put down on the hood of my car to pick up the soot that was dropping out of the sky. So those are just some more sort of thinking about what the animals are in these weather conditions. And let me see. Let's jump over to, I guess this is more on the theme of the smoke in the air. What do you have?
So I'd shared this, I think, before about trying to figure out the color of the sky during that one orange sky day that we had on September the 9th. And then also recording scientific methods of collecting the same soot. And then also I did something very similar to you, where I put tape down after letting the ashes collect on my journal for a little while. And I'd collected some on an electronic device because electronic devices collect dust so well when they sit out. You leave an electronic device anywhere and it seems to collect everything in the world that you don't want it to collect. So I took one that was already broken but had an intact screen. And so I used the tape to collect everything that was on that screen. Hard to see, not nearly as clear. Before that particular day happened, I was trying to figure out how I thought the smoke was moving. So I used kind of an imagine spot. I love using imagine spots, one of my favorite tools to say, could this be happening? And then making observations about like having the hard data up here and then trying to ask the questions. And I did what Fiona does and decorated my question mark to make it more personal. I love it when she does that. And then noticing the smells, my own senses, that could be fun to do in the rain too, and try to determine what the smell is. I remember during lightning storm smelling the petrichor smell. It was just divine. And then I can't find them right now, but I had some less in these proper journal pages where I think I was taking these out on different days during the snow and just like trying to scribble down things I noticed, like whether or not I could see Sutro Tower, visibility, also noticing when I saw birds around and then questioning where they were going and how they could still be flying with all of the smoke. And one fun thing we did was we collected ashes, specifically Janai collected ashes, and we looked through her microscope at them. Let me see here if I can find the page for you. But yeah, she collected ashes. And then we did what we like to call a microscope and chill. Where is that? Here they are. We looked at the ashes through her microscope. So it's kind of difficult to draw ashes because you're not really sure what parts are, important to draw, but I tried to draw it to the best of my abilities. And then seeing like the different colors and trying to figure out the difference between, what's plant materials, what's urban pollution, and what are the ashes sprinkling down, and different areas that she collected it from. And then questions, lots and lots and lots of questions. Like at one point we put water on our sample to see if it would dissolve and then see what would happen. And she noted that the stuff was clumping and not dispersing. And so then trying to notice what stuff gets trapped inside of an air bubble and how the different things move. And looking at those ashes made us wonder, what burned to create this? Is this a piece of what was once a plant? Is this somebody's home that burned? Could this be a bird? It was harrowing, but that's the way that you remember the details about this stuff, thanks to the nature journaling, is by looking really, really closely at those details and writing them down. So more ways to explore. Another idea for the rain, if you have one of those rain measuring things where it just collects, like it notes how many inches, if you're going to be out outside for a little while and it's raining really hard, you could probably put one of those out and then see just how much rain is rising up, like whether you're getting an inch right then or not. Just another way of adding numbers and more things that some kids might be more inclined to remember about rain if they're more numbers kids.
That's cool. That's really cool. Thank you. Yeah, some really useful strategies and ideas there. All of these, so we've got a number of ideas about how to record extreme weather events, ways that recording weather can look in our journals, some strategies. We've also had some thoughts and ideas about bringing students out in different kinds of weather, and how that is, what are some of the liabilities of that, and what are some of the real opportunities that you have when you kind of get out in these conditions. Let's keep this conversation open as people get other ideas and experiences. Please share it with this group. I want to thank all of you for being here today with us to kind of bat some of these ideas around. And I hope that you got some useful thoughts and strategies out of it. If you are interested, tomorrow the Nature Journal workshop is about sort of the theme is black is the new black, and how to mix blacks with watercolors and pencils, and thinking about also just other things that will get you dark values in your drawings. That should be a lot of fun. I would hope to see some of you there. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you at our next Educator workshop. Oh, also for you educators, I have launched the Nature Journal Connection series. And so the first video in the series, they are 10 to 15 minute videos that there will be one a week. I'm going to try to eventually get it so they all come out on the same day of the week. But that didn't happen this week. But probably later on today, I will be releasing video number 2 in this series. And this would be a great way you can share these videos with your students and be able to it'd be a great way of introducing them to the art of nature journaling. A new skill introduced each week, a new little project each week. Before we go, Brian, Ivea, Melinda, would you folks like to say anything about classes or workshops you have going on? Is there anybody else also here in our community who is a nature journaling educator who has some classes or workshops or things that they wanted to share with us? Please do let us know. Brian, why don't we start with you, then bounce down to Ivea, then Melinda, then anybody else who's also doing some teaching right now that you wanted to share that information with the group. I want to invite you also to let us know. Brian, up to you.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, this Thursday at 10 a.m. or this Saturday at 10 a.m., the Great Valley Nature Journal Club will have a meeting. The details will share soon enough. I think we're going to talk about using words in our nature journal.
Words, fantastic.
Basics.
Thank you. And it's neat how when you really kind of dial in on a topic like that, you're going to see all sorts of possibilities. That should be a really great workshop. Thank you so much. Ivea, did you want to say anything about Pencil Miles?
Yep. Pencil Miles will be meeting at its normal time, and I'll post the link and the links as well in the chat. Friday at 9 o'clock Pacific time, Saturday 3 p.m. Pacific time, and as usual, there's no homework, just people getting together to chat and have a good time. So everybody's welcome.
Thank you for hosting those. It's a really wonderful way to kind of keep connected with the nature journaling community in these times. Thank you, Ivea. Melinda, you are muted.
Okay, I do the Sunday Nature Journal Club, and we meet 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, and it's free, open to anybody, any level. You can check sparkinature.com/events, and my whole calendar is there. I have some other free workshops. One that's coming up this Friday. It's Friday late afternoon. We're making a DIY journal, and it's 3 sessions. So making a journal, introducing you to nature journaling. I'm partnering with my local library, and they are hosting it. So if you're local, you can get supplies to make your journal. Otherwise, you can just sign on for the free workshop. I also have a new introductory nature journaling class, a new round that's starting up today. If you miss it today and you want to join, it's 6 sessions, and all the sessions are recorded. And you can find it on, let me see, I'm going to type it into the chat, and then you can click the link and it'll open up in your web browser. And let's see, this Sunday, what we do is we log in to Zoom for a few minutes. I introduce a topic and do a little demo. Then we all log off and we go and do some nature journaling. And then we come back and do some sharing. And it's a lot of fun. So you can join for all of it or part of it, whatever you're here for. And hope to see you for any of these activities, because nature journaling is really more fun when you're doing it together with others, right? Instead of by yourself, and being inspired. And when you share like we did today and getting excited about a topic that you never knew you could be excited about, that's what we can share in our community. So come check it out. Anyone interested in the DIY journal, it is going to be sparkinnature.com/events, and just go and you can check for Friday afternoon's workshop. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that wanted to share classes or opportunities, important messages for this community? Don't see anybody popping up.
Melinda, I don't see the, sorry, Jack.
Okay.
I don't see the nature journal. I just took a look for the events. It didn't come up. Anyway, you know now.
Okay.
It's on my calendar, so just click Friday afternoon. If you just mouse around, it's listed for Friday afternoon is the Marina Library workshop.
So
Okay,
go to
thank
Spark in Nature and then check her calendar there. Just wanted to tell you folks one last little extreme weather anecdote. Very often on my nature journal pages, I'll put the metadata, the date, the location, the time, anything that I think is relevant. And part of that, I usually include a little icon for the weather. So, you know, a little cloud symbol or a cloud with the sun poking out behind it. It's partly cloudy or it's sunny, or a little cloud with raindrops coming out of it. Kind of like they do for the weather. When you see the weather in the newspaper, they got a little icon for it. So I'll put those little icons in. And I had never had one where there was, where I got to draw in a lightning storm. So a few years ago, there was a lightning storm in the San Francisco Bay Area. And just because I wanted to be able to have that icon in my journal with the lightning coming out of it, I went running around in this in this lightning storm, looking for things to draw, just so that I could do that. So the extreme weather can be another thing that gets you out, and just sort of think, how cool would that be if kind of going like, oh my gosh, it's an extreme weather event today. And most people kind of go like, I think that's a good day to stay indoors. For kind of folks in this community, it can also be kind of a prompt to like, look, it's extreme weather. Go grab your journal. Let's go play. So want to just leave everybody with that thought and that idea. Thank you all so much for sharing your ideas and passion so generously. And I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.